Chairman Jerome Powell has moved the federal funds rate up again. Let's talk about this. What effects could it have on sports cards? Is it not as bad as maybe we think it might be? Let's talk through it. Hello to all my sports card collectors, investors, all of my collectibles friends. We are back again. It is another sports card collectibles video. We've got some finance mixed in today. We've got some big picture economic stuff that is going on. Will it affect us? Probably, but we're going to kind of talk through those things and what parts can be affected, what might not be affected. It's going to be a good time. Definitely hit that subscribe button. If you've been hanging around, I see you watching, but you haven't committed yet. Join the team. Hit that big red button down below. Hit the notification bell because frankly, we put out a lot of videos and I have subscribers that reach out to me. Hey, can you make a video on this or that or whatever? And I'm like, hey, I actually made a video on that 4 days ago. So I know that there are some that just kind of slip through the cracks. So don't forget to hit the notification bell to keep up to date with what's going on the channel. Also connect with me on IG at SportsCardDad. It's where I show a lot of my pickups and do my reels and all that sort of stuff. So definitely check me out there, as well as the Twitter, the SportsCardDad. All right, so what is new and going on? All right, so the new CPI report came out, about a week ago, and it showed that inflation has slowed down just barely, like 8.2%, I believe, coming off of 8.3%. So still pretty red hot inflation. And the Fed chair has promised that he is going to be working inflation down until we see it on that CPI down to about 2%. So 8%, 2%, it's a big difference. And there's a few things that I took away from just listening to him talk. One of them is this rate increase puts us up to about, I think it's 3.25 is the federal funds rate currently. And he looks at that as the bottom of it being restrictive to the economy. The other thing we have to keep in mind is unemployment is really not an issue right now as it is. And so when we talk about recessions, unemployment's a big part of that. For us to be in a true recession, unemployment has to be elevated. And right now he is kind of the attitude of like, hey, we've got more jobs than people out there. Unemployment is just fine, not really seeing much of a huge issue. So we're okay putting pressure on the labor market. And that's what they're going to do. So they're going to put pressure on the labor market. And they also mentioned too that housing had become overheated, which is true. But the problem that we've got in housing that is a little bit interesting is that we have a supply issue. So there's a shortage of houses, residences in various parts of the country. And so what's happening is now we've got mortgage rates are going up and the supply is not increasing. I mean, typically what that means is prices come down. There's kind of an inverse effect between mortgage rates going up, prices come down on housing and real estate. But the problem is, again, is we have a supply issue. So there's not a bunch of pressure on pricing to come down. So right now you have still kind of high prices, but you have rising mortgage rates. So people that are still going to buy a $500,000 house, $600,000 house literally a year ago, it would have been half the cost. Like your payment, instead of it being, $1,200 a month or $1,500 a month, I'm just throwing out numbers. Now it's $2,500 a month. Include taxes, insurance, and all the rest of it. So your buying power is not great right now. It's just not a great buying real estate environment as far as mortgages go. And I think too, you have a lot of people that are scrambling to buy because they're afraid mortgages are going to continue to rise. Mortgage rates. If I caught this right, and what he was saying is he wouldn't be surprised to see this another point, like sitting at like 4.5 to 5% federal fund rate. That's a positive federal fund rate. And so that's going to put pressure. It's going to put downward pressure on these sorts of things. And it's making lending money more expensive than what we've seen over the last 15 years. I mean, if mortgage rates, I think there's the 30-year fixed is sitting at about like 5.9, 6%, 6.1. If we're seeing 30-year mortgages at 6.5, 7%, that's higher than it's been in 15 to 20 years. That's a whole generation of people that have never seen mortgage rates that are that high. Now, to go back to 1981, where we had real serious inflation problems, the mortgage rate was at 17, 18% in 1981. I know because my parents bought their first house in 1981, the year I was born, and it was a 17% mortgage rate. So could be worse, could certainly be worse. Now, granted, in 1981, houses were a lot less expensive than they are now. It's all kind of relative. So it's tricky business. obviously they're trying to toe the line of, they've got to kind of reconcile for inflation without completely crippling the economy as well. So it's tough. It's tough sledding. What does it mean for card prices specifically? It's going to depend, but who it's going to hurt here and where inflation is hurting, people that are renting. So people that are renting or have adjustable mortgages, they're going to be affected because you're having rises in rents. And then you're going to also have, rise. If you have a variable mortgage, once it reaches kind of that end of the line where it's like, oh, it's fixed for, however many years, and then we're going to variable or whatever, then it starts to go way up and it can put people in harm's way. They could lose their house potentially. Price of food is still moving up. So they're having to try to cool that off as well. And also something that all of us really contend with, credit card debt. So if you have credit card debt, that's a variable interest rate that will move up. So you'll be paying more interest on that credit card debt. I carry credit card debt. A lot of folks carry credit card debt. Fortunately, we don't have a tremendous amount, but it's something that my wife and I have talked about, like, okay, that's something that we need to be careful of. We need to watch, just make sure we're keeping tabs on all that stuff. So this can affect everybody in certain ways. So if you're paying more for rent, if you're paying more for food, fortunately, gas has come down a little bit. Hopefully gas comes down more. If you're paying more for everyday things, and also you're paying more interest on your credit card debt, this doesn't directly affect card prices, but it's just another thing. It's money taking away from disposable income, which disposable income is what we use for cards. As we've talked about previously, this has kind of turned into more of an upper middle class to wealthy person's hobby. Unless you're dealing kind of in the lower end with stuff, which I think it certainly affects those that have been doing this as a hobby that are like, oh, I've got $100 a month to spend in the dollar box and with $5 cards, $10 cards, maybe try to flip some here and there. As they're trying to sort this stuff out, those are people that are getting hit. They just don't have as much disposable income. They don't have that $100 a month for cards. Maybe they spend $200 or $300 on a hobby box every month or something. That's gone. So these are pretty serious economic pressures that can get worked through. These things can turn around quickly. There is some optimism too. I know it's interesting. Maybe we're starting to get used to the federal fund rate moving up, and it's almost like it's priced in now, to where we're like, okay, we understand it's going to keep on moving up until inflation comes down. We understand that it's going to take some time. So it's not some huge shock every month now when they keep on raising the rates. And so maybe it's all kind of mentally we're ready for it and we're preparing for it. And so it's not as much of a shock as maybe it was kind of in the summertime when they were really kind of getting going. There's a lot of fear, around how much is going to happen. How is it going to affect everything? Gas prices also in the summer went shooting up. And that's really the stuff that scares people is gas prices. When you think about inflation, yes, food prices, rent, all that, very much so. But gas prices are what gets people attention, man. If gas is $6 at the pump, all of a sudden you're starting to feel pretty horrible about the economy, about everything. It hits you in the face every time you go out to drive your car, your vehicle. So it's something we're going to need to watch. It's going to affect certain segments of the hobby. The millionaires that are buying $1 million unproven quarterback cards probably doesn't affect them as much, probably doesn't cut into their card budget too much. But for the majority of other folks that are buying into certain things, it does affect them. It affects that lower to middle class end, that are buying into a break here and there, or are buying, singles here and there, buying packs, whatever. This might be the thing that kind of over the next few months, it takes people out of the game for a little bit. And you need all levels. You need to have guys, gals buying on that lower end that enjoy the lower end stuff and the middle tier stuff and then on the high end. So this ecosystem is all working together. And although it does feel a lot like it's just the high end stuff, there is a lot of that lower and mid end stuff that is transacted every single day. And we need that. So this will be interesting to see how this plays out. It might be a little bit of a downturn. I do think though, again, I think this is kind of a short-term thing. We're kind of a short-term downturn, but then we have some recovery, coming in the next 6 months. It might not mean that rates are going to shoot back down. It probably doesn't, but maybe they tick it back down slowly. Maybe at some point in 6 months, they tick it back down and, quarter of a point, or something. And people are like, okay, optimism, we're back in the game. I think that's going to be something that's going to be really interesting to watch. Guys, let me know your thoughts in the comments. Is this stuff affecting your everyday hobby life or not really? What's going on in your world? How does it affect you and your household? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Stay healthy, stay awesome, and I will talk to you again later.